those of you who have been tuning in to Cool2Craft this past year, you know that top of my jewelry making list is Cool2Cast. It is a plaster product that you can pour into molds to create lots of really fun jewelry. One of my very favorite techniques is embedding into Cool2Cast. I'd like to show you what I do with crystals. It's lots of fun to embed buttons and beads and stones and charms into Cool2Cast. The first thing that you want to do is prepare your mold. Just drop your pieces into the mold. Make sure that they fit. Some of these pieces that I grabbed are too large and the Cool2Cast will not cover them. So be sure that you check out to make sure that your stones and buttons and beads fit into your molds. I'm going to be mixing up just a small batch of Cool2Cast today, and a great way to do that is to mix it in a plastic bag. So I have a half a cup of Cool2Cast, and I'm adding a 1/4 cup of water. Put that all together in the plastic bag and give it a good shake and mix it up for about a minute. I have some that's stuck in the corner here that I want to make sure gets into the water. So be sure and check the corners of your bag. Keep shaking. You want this to be the consistency of pancake batter. This pouring from the bag technique is what my sister Heidi came up with. I usually do much larger batches. I can see I have a little bit of dried Cool2Cast in the corner. But now we're ready to pour. So carefully give that bag a squeeze to fill up the mold. I'm going to come back and tap that mold so that it covers that piece. And we have one more, two more up here. Don't overfill your mold. Now what you want to do is gently tap it on the side. I'm going to move that Cool2Cast around just a little bit. I can see that I need a little bit more in this piece right here. I have more room in that mold and I want to cover up that crystal. There we go. When you tap on the side, it helps to level and also bring any of those air bubbles to the top. The next thing we're going to do is let this set for about 1 hour for the Cool2Cast to become solid so we can pop them out of the mold. But leave this undisturbed for about 1 hour. Now that my pieces have been setting for an hour, it's time to unmold them. And you can tell by pressing on them that the Cool2Cast is firm, but it's still moist. Turn your mold over, just press, and they pop right out. And at this point, what I like to do is take a wooden skewer or a toothpick and help to move some of that plaster off the top of the stone or the crystal. It's really easy to do this while this is right out of the mold and still a little moist. So you can see that that helps to uncover the piece that's embedded into the Cool2Cast. So keep working at that. You can see sometimes you have to really push that Cool2Cast to the side because it has, remember that stone was at the bottom of the mold, so sometimes the fiber plaster comes up underneath that, which then would be the top of your piece. So you have to push a lot of it aside. You can see on this one that the stone, you can just barely see it, but watch when I start pushing it back. It starts to uncover that stone that's been embedded. So keep working to uncover all of the items that you have embedded into your molded piece. And what you want to do then is let these set aside for a couple of hours or overnight to dry. Once your pieces have set for several hours or overnight, they're ready to color. One more step before you start coloring is you might take a wet wipe and just gently rub it along the edge and the back, or take sandpaper and rub it along the edge and the back surface, and that helps to smooth it. I like the wet wipes while these pieces are still slightly damp, because it smooths those edges nicely without getting a lot of dust from sanding. I use alcohol ink to color my pieces, and there are a couple of different methods. You can apply your ink directly. Which gives you some beautiful patterns. You can go bold and bright. Or subtle. Be sure also when you color these to color the back completely. You always want your jewelry pieces to look just as good on the back as they do on the front. You will find that the ink reacts differently depending on how long you have let your pieces dry. Come back with my wet wipe to wipe down the crystal or the stone to remove any excess ink. let these pieces dry completely because the next step we are going to overstamp. So this ink needs to be dry completely. Once your pieces have dried, it's time to overstamp them. And by the way, if you don't want ink on your fingers, be sure and wear gloves when you're doing any of your inking. I picked some of my stamps that have intriguing design to them, and you'll find that you can use just corners of stamps or use an entire stamp for your overstamping. I use my Stays On, which is a solvent ink in jet black, and ink up my stamp. And I like to take my piece and press it right into the stamp. That gives me a little bit more control of placement. You can see on this design it's very subtle, so I want to be sure and add plenty of ink onto my stamp. You can also press your stamp into your piece. Whenever I get any sort of ink on that stone, I just wipe it off with my wet wipe. Let's try this design. We'll use the butterfly wings. And don't worry if there's any spots that don't have a design, because you can take some of your very small stamps and fill in that design. So keep stamping all of your pieces and let that ink dry. The final step is to add your 3D glaze over the top, and that is how you create your embedding into Cool2Cast. Cool2Cast and the jewelry molds are available for purchase at shop Cool2Craft.com.